HighBridge, a division of recorded books, presents The Dollmaker, a novel, by Nina Allan, read by Alex Wyndham. The Dwarf. The mountains fade into the greyish light as the Queen and her dwarf set sail, their ship swaying upon the polished ocean waves. She gazes up into the dome of the sky, into the shimmering blue distance, shot through with milky threads of cloud. "You stars have never lied to me," she cries. "You tell me I am soon to die, yet I cannot deny I'm glad to go." And then the dwarf falls upon the Queen, weeping, blinded by agony. He binds a red silk cord about her throat. "This hell is of your own making," he says. "You left me for the king. The only thing that can bring me joy now is your death. I'll loathe myself forever for your murder, but I can't help myself. I'll send you, pale ghost, to an early grave." She clasps her breast, so full of young life, as bitter tears rain down her face. She lifts her eyes to heaven, praying. "I don't want my death to cause you pain," she says. The dwarf kisses her pale cheeks, as in that same moment she slips away. The dwarf gazes upon the woman, fixed in death. He commits her body to the waves, and yet the longing in his heart will not be still. He is doomed to roam the seas forevermore. Matthias von Collin, translation by Nina Allan. 6. Death, Funeral, and Burial of Dolls. Sometimes these are quite isolated from each other and from sickness, and sometimes all follow in due course. Of all the returns available under this rubric, 90 children mention burial, their average age being 9, 80 mentioned funerals, 73 imagined their dolls dead, 30 dug up dolls after burial to see if they had gone to heaven or simply to get them back. Of these, 11 dug them up the same day. Only 9 speak of them as dying naturally of definite diseases. 15 put them under sofa, in drawers, attics, or gave them away, calling this death. 30 expressed positive belief in future life of dolls. 8 mentioned future life for them without revealing their own convictions. 3 buried dolls with pets and left them. 3 bad or dirty dolls went to the bad place, 14 to heaven. 17 children were especially fond of funerals. 12 dolls came to death by accidental bumps or fractures. 1 burst, 1 died of a melted face, 2 were drowned, 1 a paper doll, 1 died because her crying apparatus was broken, 1 doll murdered another, was tried and hung. Dolls of which children tire often die. 30 children had never imagined dolls dead. This parents often forbid. 1 boy killed his sister's doll with a toy cannon. 3 resurrected dolls and got new names. 5 out of 7 preachers at dolls' funerals were boys. 1 was the doctor. 3 doll undertakers are described. 22 cases report grief that seems to be very real and deep. In 23 cases, this seemed feigned. The mourning is sometimes real black and sometimes pretended. 19 put flowers on dolls' graves. 1 all that week. 28 expressly say that dolls have no souls, are not alive, and have no future life. In 21 cases, there was death but no burial. In 10, funerals but no burials. In 8, funerals but no death. From A Study of Dolls by A. Caswell, Ellis, and G. Stanley Hall, Journal of Genetic Psychology, Volume 4, Granville Stanley Hall, Carl Allan Moore Murchison, Journal Press, 1897. A knecht there was, and that a worthy man, that fro the time that he first began to ridden out, he loved chivalry, truth and honour, freedom and courtesy. Geoffrey Chaucer, Prologue, The Canterbury Tales. 1. My father didn't want me to have her, but in the end he gave in. My mother managed to persuade him he was overreacting. One evening, long after I was supposed to be in bed, I sat in the dark at the top of the stairs and listened to them arguing about her. "I won't have it in the house," said my father. "You don't want to encourage him, do you? That's exactly how these things start." "Don't be ridiculous," my mother countered. "He's only 7. He'll have forgotten about it in a week." I understood that my father was angry, but I didn't know why. I'd never heard my mother call my father ridiculous before, and the idea that I was the source of conflict between my parents was unnerving but strangely thrilling. Not that I dwelled on the matter for long. What mattered to me was not the argument, but who would win it. Her name was Marina Blue, and I loved her on sight. In a world that was confusing and occasionally frightening, she gave my heart a focus. In a shop full of bisque-headed mannequins, it was she who brought the others to life. In reality, she was nothing special. Dolls like Marina Blue roll off the production lines in their thousands and are of little value to the collector. Yet there was something, even so, that set her apart from such generalities. She drew the eye, as all things born of sentient creativity are bound to draw the eye. She had presence. More than that, she had dignity. I knew from the moment I saw her that she would change my life. The town I grew up in was small, not much more than a village. There were 3 pubs and a small hotel, one main shopping street, and the old cinema, which had recently been converted into an indoor antiques market. There were 2 parks. One was at the top of the town, close to the Rivermead housing estate, and had infamously been the site of an abduction. The other, whose official unsuitable title was the Heathfield Pleasure Gardens, was frequented by drug users and petty criminals through the hours of darkness and turned instantly to quagmire whenever it rained. I wasn't allowed to play in either of the parks. I wasn't allowed to go into town at all unless my mother was with me. The school I attended was called Martin's. I used to believe it had acquired its name from the dozens of house martins that nested beneath the eaves, though when I was older I discovered it was named after its founder, a Peter Martins, who came to Britain from Copenhagen to study at Oxford. At the time I was there, the school still had outside toilets and that species of enormous green-painted radiator that dated from before the war. There were around 50 pupils. My ordeal did not properly begin until I graduated to St. Marriot's, the upper school, but there were intimations of trouble even so. My classmates were growing quickly. In spite of their apple cheeks and choir boys' voices, they had started to mutate into men. I was a moon-faced, pot-bellied, grub-shaped boy with wet-looking hair and glasses. Still less than 4 feet tall, I was too weak to kick a football, too small to scramble a fence. Boys who'd happily included me in their games just the summer before began to take note of these differences and draw away. The school day ended at 3. My mother collected me at the gate, and afterwards we would go shopping. Not the serious fortnightly shopping that required a car, but small, pleasurable errands, such as buying sewing thread or fruitcake or the Radio Times. My favourite shop was Prendergast's, the stationer's, where my mother bought her writing paper and envelopes, and which doubled as a toy shop. I was allowed to browse the shelves while she completed her purchases. I soon learned that if I mentioned any particular toy often enough, I would usually be given it eventually. On the day I first saw Marina Blue sitting in Prendergast's window, there was still a full 3 months to go before my 8th birthday. I immediately became convinced that someone would buy the doll before then, that I would never see her again. It never entered my head that there was more than one Marina Blue, that in all probability there was an entire warehouse stacked with them. Her eyes were a deep sapphire, her glossy waist-length hair the perfect shade of chestnut brown. Her head, hands and feet were made of unglazed bisque porcelain, her body of cotton twill stuffed with kapok. She wore baggy bell-bottom trousers and a red-hooded top. Her square-heeled lace-up ankle boots were sewn from real leather. I felt weak and slightly nauseous at the sight of her, as if I were about to faint. "Come along, Andrew, don't dawdle. We need to get to the bakery before it closes." My mother grabbed me by the hand and tried to pull me away from the window, but I resisted her. For perhaps the first time in my life, I was torn between my usual habit of compliance and the dark and delicate thrust of my own desires. "I want to go inside," I wheedled. "I want to see the little girl in red." "That's a doll," said my mother. She glanced quickly towards the window display and then away again. "Dolls are for girls." I felt close to tears. "It's nearly my birthday," I said. "That's what I want. You'll change your mind long before that. You know what you're like." In fact, this was untrue, and both of us knew it. I'd always been a child who loved certainty. I gazed at my mother in despair, then allowed myself to be led away in the direction of the bakery. In the weeks that followed, I made sure to mention Marina Blue every day, speaking with the studied nonchalance I had previously employed in pursuit of other treasures I had coveted: the miniature kaleidoscope, the magnetic dragonflies, the pewter monkey. In its early stages, my gambit met with a seeming indifference that was easily the equal of my own. Then, with less than a fortnight to go before the day itself, I overheard my mother and father having their argument. This was the endgame, and I knew it. When I finally sneaked off to bed that night, it was in the expectation and fevered hope that the victory was mine. She came in a cardboard box, nestled in yellow crepe. "It could be valuable one day," my father said. "You know what they say about antiques of the future?" He rubbed his hands together as if he were cold. "I hope this is still what you want," my mother added. I felt as if something was expected of me, a particular turn of phrase in expression of gratitude, but I was too marvellously overwhelmed to say anything at all. I briefly fingered Marina Blue's red jacket, then put the lid back on her box. I took exaggerated pleasure in the other gifts I had been given: a mint green anorak, a pack of playing cards on the theme of capital cities, a carton of sugar mice. I blew out the candles on my birthday cake, and afterwards the three of us played charades. It wasn't until later, alone in my bedroom, that I felt able to hold her. She felt heavy in my arms and wonderfully real. Her hair smelled of pine wood. When I laid her on her back, her eyes slid closed. I placed her box gently on the chair beside my bed. Even with the lid on, I found I could remember her in every detail. A great deal has been written on dolls. There are volumes on the history of dolls, the provenance of dolls, the value of dolls, heavy catalogues filled with lavish illustrations, images that quicken the blood and stimulate desire. I have read that the doll is a surrogate for friendship or for family, for love. Most children grow out of dolls eventually, but not the collector. The true collector, like the poet or the idiot, remains prey to the intensified sensibilities of childhood until the day they die. In the introduction to her memoir, A Brief History of Wonderland, Doris Schaefer, the renowned doll collector and curator of the Museum of Childhood in Bad Homburg, describes the moment when she first saw an Ernst Ziegler Gaby doll at an auction in Frankfurt. Schaefer was 30 years old at the time, a partner at law with a flourishing practice, but her encounter with the doll was an epiphany. She gave up the law the following year and devoted her life to the creation of the museum. I am 4 feet 9 inches tall. Most of the puppy fat fell away in time, but because of my restricted height, I still appeared round. In addition to that, I wore heavy National Health spectacles, which seemed to accentuate both my shortness of stature and my pudgy physique. For my 16th birthday, my parents gave me a pair of glasses with tinted rectangular lenses and narrow black frames. The new glasses streamlined my moon face, at least a little, but did not stop me resembling a diminutive schoolmaster, which is what everyone assumed I would become. Most of my classmates called me the dwarf, though there were other names too. I knew from an early age there was no point in my even trying to belong, that aspiring to be like them would, in some mysterious way, increase their contempt. Rather, I regarded my schoolfellows as members of another tribe, whose customs were mysterious and filled with savagery. My intelligence I took for granted. I enjoyed all my school subjects, but my true interests already lay elsewhere. The school library had little to offer me, but the public library in Welton was surprisingly well stocked. There was also Poncianella, a monthly magazine filled with articles on all aspects of dolls and doll collecting. I saved my pocket money so I could buy it the day it came out. I read each new issue from cover to cover and then read it again. Even my father came gradually to accept that my passion for dolls was not something I was about to grow out of. In the end, he stopped worrying about me. I think he was able to come to terms with my obsession by convincing himself that my hobby would eventually pay off. A lifetime in business had taught him that anything can become valuable, given time and the right circumstances, be it piggy banks or Victorian underwear or used beer bottles. One memorable Christmas, he presented me with Merrick's Price Guide to World Dolls, an indispensable textbook that had thus far been well beyond my means. "We'll have you working for Christie's at this rate," he said. He smiled at me, and it was a good smile, open and friendly and relaxed. I don't think I was ever the son he had imagined for himself, but we always found plenty to talk about, and in any case, I liked my father. I didn't see any reason to trouble his mind by explaining that the goal of the true collector is not the accumulation of riches, but the consummation of passion. I remember how my father adored his cars, both the steel blue Volvo he drove for work and the vintage Jaguar that lived in the garage and was taken out only at weekends. The Jaguar was racing green with chrome trim and soft chestnut leather upholstery. My father cleaned the Jaguar once a fortnight without fail. I was sometimes allowed to buff the upholstery, using a chamois leather moistened with a yellow polish called Heller's wax that came in a tin. I loved the smell of the Hellers, resinous and woody as ambergris. I think my father hoped that by letting me help him with the Jaguar, he might be able to spark my interest in cars in general, but although I listened carefully in an effort to please him, I invariably forgot most of what he told me more or less as soon as we went back inside. I never learned to drive, and after my father died, I stopped pretending I ever would. By the time of his death, both the Jaguar and the Volvo had been sold. He ran an Audi saloon instead, a car he always despised, though I never knew why. I have always found it interesting, the way people and their vehicles can become inseparable in the mind. My dear friend Clarence drives a white Ford van with a cracked rear windscreen and a large dent in the passenger door. She flexes her muscles as she gets into the driver's seat, like a soldier climbing into a tank. Often when I think of Clarence, I think of that action, the way the van has become identified for me with her strength, a chaotic yet indefatigable way of being. Information: biographical, bibliographical, photographic, on the life and work of Eva Chaplin, and/or friendship correspondence. Female, single, mid-40s. Main interests: dolls of Germany and Eastern Europe. Please reply to Bramber Winters, P.O. Box 656, Bodmin, UK. 2. On the back page of Punchinella there was a personals column. I always read it, as I read everything else in the magazine, and in many ways Bramber's advertisement was no different from the thousands of others I had seen there over the years. What first drew me to Bramber Winters was the beauty I found in her name. I vaguely recalled that Bramber was the name of a place, and when I looked in Coastadge's English Almanac, I found I was correct. Bramber was a small village in East Sussex, whose chief visitor attractions were a ruined castle and a pipe museum. When I asked Bramber if she had ever been to the village, she said she had never heard of it. Later in our correspondence, I sent her a postcard of Bramber Castle I happened to find on a stall at Camden Market. The photograph was in black and white. It showed a grassy mound surmounted by a number of toppled stones. A near illegible copperplate script covered most of the reverse. The Horsham postmark was dated July 1972. The recipient was a Mrs. Hilda O'Gorman of East Mersey, Essex. I wondered what Hilda O'Gorman was doing now, if she was still alive. As always when I handle old letters, I felt a frisson of energy, a tiny secret acknowledgement from out of the past. I could almost convince myself that both sender and recipient knew of my plans for their postcard and approved. When it came to Bramber's request for information about Eva Chaplin, I was on less certain ground. I had heard of Eva Chaplin, of course I had. An artist of high renown and vanishingly small output, Chaplin was a Polish émigré who had arrived in London at the outbreak of World War II. Some accounts insisted she was penniless, others maintained she came with the ubiquitous hoard of gold coins sewn into the lining of her shabby overcoat. All agreed she had turned to seamstressing and later to doll-making as a way of making ends meet. Her dolls are unique, prized by museums around the world, sought after by private collectors who pursue them with a zeal that can seem excessive even by the standards of the doll fraternity. I had never felt particularly drawn to them myself. I found there to be something cold in Chaplin's creations, an edge of the uncanny I did not care for. Not that I said so to Bramber. I told her I was making inquiries, that I had a lot of contacts among European dealers, and that I might even be able to get her an interview with Arthur Zuckerman, who had photographed dolls all over the world, including, famously, the American Chaplins. The first of these statements, at least, was true. As for the rest, I told myself those were bridges that could be crossed if and when I came to them. When I asked Bramber what it was, in particular, that drew her to Chaplin's work, she said she first became interested when she happened to see a play based on one of Chaplin's stories. "It was when I was at school," Bramber wrote. "My best friend Helen was in it. Eva Chaplin wasn't afraid to make dolls that weren't comforting," she added. "She seemed to know that dolls are people, just like us." I had never read Chaplin's stories. As I understood it, Chaplin first began writing when she was a student in Krakow, though her work had not been published until after her death. I did know that Chaplin had supposedly based many of her dolls on the characters in her stories, but I never felt particularly curious about them, probably because I found the dolls themselves so unattractive. I could see what they meant to Bramber, though, and the candor of her words touched me deeply. I had never found anyone whose feeling for dolls appeared to accord so closely with my own. The experience was thrilling to me, and almost shocking. I think that was the moment I first intuited the depth and intimacy of our connection. I had been writing to Bramber for more than a year before I understood that we were destined to be together. The next time I wrote, I included my phone number. When Bramber wrote back, she said there was no payphone at West Edge House and that she didn't have a mobile. I wasn't sure I believed her. Who doesn't own a mobile these days? But on reflection, I decided she was simply one of those people who dislike using the telephone. This small insight into her personality only endeared her to me further. Certainly I didn't perceive it as a problem. Soon she would come to trust me as I trusted her, and in the meantime there were our letters, which I looked forward to as harbingers of a new reality, a reality in which we would confess our togetherness, becoming more fully ourselves in a way that is only possible in the presence of that rarest of human sympathies, mutual love. The idea that I might go and see her did not occur to me at first. I had not been invited, after all, and I was hardly the sort of person who could present themselves at someone's door in the sure and certain knowledge of being welcomed inside. My life thus far had taught me enough about rejection not to actively court it. But once the initial seed had been planted, a television documentary about the decline of the tourism industry in the West Country, I found myself unable to uproot it. I would go west, I decided, and even if my bravery was not rewarded, at least I would have the satisfaction of knowing where I stood. For some weeks, months even, the idea of the thing and then the planning of it, consulting route maps, perusing railway timetables and gazetteer entries for the places of interest I hoped to visit along the way, was enough to sustain me. But as April became May and drew closer to June, I knew I must act or find myself ensnared in a cycle of regret. After browsing for information online, I discovered the existence of the West Country Rover ticket, a travel card with a 3-month validity that would enable me to access any part of the Devon, Cornwall and Somerset public transport networks, switching freely between bus, coach and train as my itinerary demanded. The woman behind the counter of the travel agents where I purchased my Rover card had pink hair and blue eyes. Both made a startling, if not altogether unpleasing, contrast with the leopard print fake fur boa draped across her plump shoulders. "Going on holiday, are we?" she said. "Fancy a spot of sunshine on the English Riviera?" "The sun isn't really my friend, I'm afraid. I prefer a nice breeze." She smiled at me brightly, as if my answer had told her everything about me she would ever need to know. She pressed a button to release my ticket from the machine and tore it off along its perforated edge. She selected a plastic wallet from the drawer underneath the counter and slipped the ticket inside. "Best keep it safe," she said. "Better safe than sorry." West Edge House, Torquay's End, Bodmin, Cornwall. Dear Andrew, thank you for your letter. I was so excited when it arrived. I've always wondered whether anyone actually reads the personal ads in magazines, and now I know they do. I would be delighted to correspond with you, if you would like to. There's no one here I can talk to, not about dolls anyway. I'm sure you understand. I have 36 dolls in all, 20 German, 10 English, and 6 French. The first doll I ever had was a Marianne doll by Claude Muriel. She was given to me by a friend of my mother's when I was 10. So you live in London? I haven't been in the city in 20 years. I think about going sometimes. I would love to visit the museums, but then it seems so far, and my job here makes it difficult for me to get away. Torquay's End is a small village, not much more than a hamlet, really. Some of the people at West Edge House, Diz and Jackie, for instance, have been here for years. I want to thank you for the postcards you sent. I loved the Paul Chantal doll. She reminds me of a student from Lyon who used to give French conversation classes at my secondary school. Isn't it strange, the way the dolls always seem to bring back the past? I suppose it's because they never age. The post came early today. Our deliveries sometimes don't arrive until after lunch. Dr. Leslie says they leave us till last because we're least likely to complain. But once I heard Diz saying to Jackie that really it's because the postman is afraid to come up here. Diz's real name is Derek Royman. Sylvia Passmore, Sylvia is the housekeeper here, told me he used to be a doctor. Diz spends most of his time with Jackie, though you couldn't imagine two people less alike. The postman brought a parcel this morning, but Jackie wouldn't open the door to him. She stood stark still in the passageway between the stationery cupboard and the entrance to the visitors' lounge, staring through the glass partition at the letters that were already on the doormat. She was wearing her yellow ribbed tights, the ones that make her legs look like corn cobs. When the postman rang the bell again, Sylvia Passmore came out of the office, moved Jackie aside, and went to open the door. "Don't let him in," Jackie said. "He'll kill us all."
"Parcel for Morris Leslie,"
said the postman.
"Can you sign?"
Sylvia signed the paper on the postman's clipboard with a red biro, and then he gave her the parcel. Sylvia closed the door and came back inside. Jackie stuck both hands behind her back, flattening herself against the wall. "Don't put that near me," she said. "You don't know what's in there." Sylvia made a tutting sound and marched off down the corridor. When I touched Jackie's arm, I found she was trembling. Although when I saw her an hour or so later, sitting in the garden with Des, she seemed perfectly all right again. It's hard to tell why she gets herself in such a state over such ordinary things, how much she remembers afterwards. There are days when she chats away to the postman as if she's known him for years. Both Jackie's parents are dead now. Every couple of weeks she has a visitor, a tall, straight-backed woman with glasses. Sylvia Passmore told me this woman is Jackie's daughter. A couple of Sundays ago, the woman turned up here and asked if she could take Jackie for a drive in the country. Jackie wouldn't get in the car at first, but then Diz said he'd like to go too, and so things turned out all right. I wanted to send you a postcard of Bodmin, but Jackie refused to give me one, even though she has a whole stash of postcards, hundreds of them, hidden under her bed. I'm very fond of Jackie, but I have to admit she can be unreasonable sometimes. I was born in a village called Heath, which is not far from Bodmin, but I grew up in Truro. We moved there just after my first birthday because it was easier for my father to find work there. My father was a car mechanic. My mother liked to say he was a mechanical engineer, but he never did any exams. He was just good at mending things. I don't only mean cars. The first thing I remember him mending was an alarm clock, the battered old West clocks from beside my parents' bed. I was 6 at the time. He sat me between his knees and let me watch what he was doing.
"I'm not sure what's wrong with her, Ba. Let's get her on the table and then we'll see."
He took the clock to pieces, and when he put it back together again, it started ticking immediately. He couldn't charge as much as the qualified garage mechanics because he didn't have the certificates, but customers came to him anyway. They could tell he had an instinct. Our house was on Harlequin Road. My mother liked to say their bedroom had a view of Truro Cathedral, even though all you could see was the tip of the spire. I liked my own room better because it overlooked the builders' merchants at the back. They were called Grote and Sons, and they started work early. I used to make a gap in the curtains and watch the men in their blue overalls loading bricks and wood and scaffolding onto lorries. Dad sometimes did odd jobs there, mending broken machines. My first real memories date from my 5th birthday, when I was given a glass snow dome with a model of Hampton Court Palace inside. Although the snow dome was mine, I wasn't allowed to keep it in my bedroom until I was 8. My mother was afraid I might break it. My mother and father used to drive over most weekends and take tea with Dr. Leslie. In the end, they stopped coming. They were bored, probably.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?